The way I see this shaking out in 20 years is all these big brands are going to be brokers that sit on top of an exchange. Like, I don't think any sports book will be making any of their own markets in 20 years.
The Business of Betting podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. 4 out of the top 5 U.S. operators personalize player experiences with Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/businessofbetting. And if you like what you see, you will get your first month free.
What is up, everybody? This is Jason Trost, the host of the Business of Betting podcast. I'm coming to you from Covent Garden. We have a special episode today with Brad from Zero Latency. I jumped on this week to talk about Kalshi, CFTC, betting exchanges, what's new is old, and prediction markets. So please have a listen, and I really enjoyed this podcast.
Hello, and welcome to episode 80 of Zero Latency, the podcast from Eilers Krejcik Gaming. I'm your host, Brad Allen, and I'm joined today by a returning guest, Jason Trost, as in most, CEO of Smarkets. Hello, Jason. How are you doing?
Hello. I'm doing well.
Good to have you back from your rival podcast over there, the Business of Betting. But we're going to talk today about mainly prediction markets, because that is quite a topic du jour, and maybe a little bit of Smarkets and UK exchanges. But let's start with prediction markets.
You don't want to call it a betting exchange anymore? You've switched?
I feel like prediction markets tells people we're talking about the US and people like Kalshi first. Am I right in thinking? Go on.
I think a huge amount of people actually don't realize that prediction markets and betting exchanges are the same thing. They think that Kalshi has innovated in some way. I mean, the innovation that Kalshi has done is the regulatory innovation, but the model is exactly the same as a betting exchange.
Yeah, regulatory arbitrage.
There you go.
So you want to get in on the act? Is that correct? Is that the way forward for Smarkets?
The water's warm, and I mean, if that sports thing holds, why not? You have to.
Yeah. So as I understand it, there's 2 ways of going forward. You can become a broker. So, you can become a broker, send liquidity to someone like Kalshi, and that's fairly easy to do. It's that might take you 6 weeks to get licensing, something like that. Or you can try and get a DCM license, where it's get the full license. Yeah.
Sorry, DCM. You're right. DCM. DCO is the clearinghouse, and DCM is the exchange. Yeah. My understanding of I'm going to screw up. There's so many acronyms in these federal agencies. The F something, which is the broker license. My understanding is that's actually pretty complicated, because you have to show that the money's in custody in a certain way, blah, blah, blah. So I don't think it is a 6-week application. I think it's more like a 6 to 12 month application. So it's not something that you can just snap your fingers and become a licensed broker for a CFTC exchange. But we want to it fits much more with what we're trying to do to become the DCM ourselves. So that's the path that we're going to take.
Yeah. So what's that process like?
It's hairy and long and detailed and political, and so we've engaged lawyers, we've engaged consultants, and it's it's not 100 miles different from a sports betting application, but because it's different federal agency, different vibe, it's a huge application. What's interesting about the CFTC is it's a principles-based organization, meaning in a lot of sports betting, it says you have to, regulation 3, 4, 5, part B says you have to time people out after 23 seconds of clicking the mouse. But the CFTC is much more principles-based, meaning they don't specify how you can meet that principle. So it's a good and bad thing. It's good in the sense that it gives you leeway to implement things that you want. It's bad in the sense that the CFTC has a fuzzy bar with which they approve applications. So you have to convince the staff that you've met the principles, and that can be logistical or it could be political. And we'll see how that shakes out.
So, I mean, it sounds like quite a big investment.
It's a big application. I'm estimating it's $2 million in 2 years.
Yeah. So how did you come to that decision? Was this a Jason Trost decision, or was there, how did you decide this is the best way forward?
That we should do it?
Yeah.
I moved to the States in 2017, and we looked at this seriously then. And back then in 2017, we looked at all the regulation around what you lovingly call prediction markets. And there's a few different paths. There's something called a no action letter, and that's the path that Predictit and Iowa election markets took, which, Kalshi is ignoring in their marketing material. Those were regulated exchange. Well, they're sort of regulated under the CFTC. The CFTC granted these no action letters, I think, in Iowa election markets as early as the 90s, and Predictit was more like late 2000s, I want to say. But this let them operate legally in the United States, in 50 states, to take bets on political markets. The catch is there's limited stakes, limited participants, and I think limited amount of money that you can deposit per account. So we decided that was so restrictive that it wasn't that interesting. And then at the time, politics was no go and sports was like 5,000 times no go. And so without politics and without sports, event markets aren't that interesting. And I think that's what Kalshi found. Things that people betting on, like the price of oil and are the interest rates going to go up or down, and is Libya going to move their national capital? Like, those markets are kind of interesting, but from an economic point of view, they're very infrequent. People don't want to bet on them very much, and you won't make any money doing that. And so I think that they took a flyer on this political thing. A federal judge agreed with them to give them a stay against the ruling of the CFTC, and that kind of opened the floodgates for them to blow up in the way that they did. So sorry, it's a little bit of a long-winded answer, but back in 2017, without politics, I thought it was not that interesting. With politics, it's 100% interesting, and with sports, it's 1,000,000% interesting. And so, with what Kalshi has done, blowing the regulatory door open, it's a no-brainer for us as a business to get a CFTC license.
So, what's the brand plan? You'll be Smarkets still? Will be something different?
Well, TBD, but I want to be Smarkets. Yeah, I want to be Smarkets in the US as an exchange, and people can trade futures exchange events on our platform. What I'm trying, my long-term vision for Smarkets is to turn it into a general trading platform. So if you want to trade stocks, bonds, options, prediction markets, you can do that with Smarkets. And so the place we're starting is the CFTC, and obviously we do sports in the UK and a few other countries already, but we want to turn Smarkets into a more generic trading platform for people.
How do you see like the market structure playing out? Would it be kind of what we see in other exchange style markets where, like, there's a top one or two because of the liquidity? Do you expect similar in the US?
From a sports exchange perspective?
From these prediction markets?
Yeah, I think eventually, like, that's the natural order for all exchanges across all asset classes. They're generally a number one and two. The liquidity consolidates in these markets. So I think eventually there will be a 1 and 2 winner in prediction markets, just like there is in S&P futures, and just like there is in gold, and just like there is in all these, like, oil trades in a certain way and on a certain exchange. The liquidity will start to pool. Sports betting is still remarkably, for the size of it is, and sports betting is huge by any measurement, the sophistication of technology is shockingly low, and it's a shockingly dinosaur-based industry for the size and essentially sports bet's a financial contract. A lot of people don't see it like that, but it's a binary option that you're trading against somebody else. And the technology that the incumbents use is very old and very unsophisticated. So I think we're still very early in what's possible in sports betting. Like, if you think about stocks today, I've been trading stocks for 30 years. And when I was, 10 years old and I bought 100 shares, I think I had to pay a $20 thing. It's expensive. It takes a long time. And now it's free. I can do it in 2 seconds, in and out all day long. Everything's automated. I think eventually sports betting will get like that. But sports betting is more akin to me trading stocks in 1988 for $20 a pop or $50 a pop. I don't know. And it being very cumbersome and expensive. And I think sports betting has yet to go through this revolution. So we'll see which exchanges end up winning and which technical rails end up winning in sports betting. But the technology to size a market is very out of whack.
So I think one of the big questions for prediction markets is whether props, SGPs, whether they'll be allowed. And I was just writing about this today. Brian Quintens, he kind of seemed to say, basically, yeah, like we're gonna let anything go. So is that kind of your expectation, that you'll be able to offer SGPs and things like that? And then follow-up question is, how are you going to do that from a market maker point of view?
Well, on the legal side, I had Daniel Wallach on my podcast a week or two ago, and he had a really interesting argument that he thinks sports is clearly illegal under the statutes, and that Kalshi is working its way through the courts, and the federal judge will come to their senses and rule against Kalshi. Whether or not the political winds of the White House obviously are pro, like YOLO regulation. The federal judges march to the beat of a different drum called the Constitution and rule of law, which is still nice that some people still believe in that in the United States. So I think there's a good chance. I think he made a very compelling argument that sports is not going to pass muster based on the federal regulation, and it's going to get struck down, and Kalshi will no longer be able to offer sports, sod whatever the CFTC says or the White House says. Who knows? I mean, it's probably a jump ball, but let's say that sports betting is illegal, then this is a moot question. Let's say the federal judge allows it to happen, the CFTC could regulate this, and it goes on. Intellectually, there's nothing different from a match odds winner, who's going to win the money line, as they call it in the United States, or match odds, or 1x2 in the UK. There's nothing different from that from a same game parlay. The mechanism of a binary option is the same, and there's no intellectual reason why these more exotic bet types should not be allowed. The only difference is there's infinite permutation of combinations, and that makes sort of the market making side a little bit more complicated. In stock trading, like IBM is IBM. So if we're trading IBM today and we're trading it tomorrow and we're trading it in 3 years, that order book is essentially going to be the same order book. But in sports, not only do you have a different event every, couple days, couple hours, but every event has, let's say, 100 permutations of standard markets, and then probably near infinite number of combinations if you start looking at these multiple products. So the mechanism to market make it's going to be different. I think you can handle most of that with a request for quote mechanism, which is basically somebody sends an order to the exchange saying, I would like a price for this. Market makers bid on it, and there's probably some mechanism that will work under a CFTC license. So I think that is possible under a CFTC mechanism.
And it's technically feasible, easy to do, hard to do. Could you do it now?
Yeah, no, it's technically not very difficult. Yeah.
Sweet. And also, just to be clear, you're planning this application or doing this application, but you also believe there's like a 50% chance you won't be able to offer sports.
Yeah, but I think there's a 100% chance we'll be able to offer politics. So if you go back to my 2017 thesis, I believe that this is interesting if you can do politics. Now, politics are only interesting in the United States once every 2 years, 4 years, a little bit like the Olympics. But I still think it's worth doing even if we don't get sports. It's a 1,000,000,000% no-brainer with sports, but I think it's a 100% no-brainer with politics. So we're going to do it regardless of whether politics gets struck down or not. Sports gets struck down.
Yeah. The New York elections were getting a little bit of buzz this week, weren't they, on Kalshi?
I think so. I mean, they've done a great job of marketing themselves. What's funny is it's like what's old is new. Like in America is just discovering this for the first time, and everybody's like, wow, this is pretty interesting stuff. And yeah, it's been around for 30 years, but yes, it is interesting. I think a lot of that new technology smell will wear off. So I think they're in America, they're in the the Google Glass phase of like the younger people won't get that reference, but it'll be hyped. It's in the hype stage, and I think eventually it'll die down and kind of settle into a normal market. And I think a lot of the people don't want to trade these asset classes, but in America it's so big, there's so many people with money, so many people like speculation. I think it's got a chance to kind of punch way above where the heights that Betfair got to in the UK, just because the market is probably arguably a lot more sophisticated and has more money than the UK market, even on a pro rata basis.
Let's imagine a world quickly where sports is allowed, where the courts say, yeah, fine, we don't care. There was a report last week, I think, that Kalshi had spoken to FanDuel, I think probably about FanDuel becoming a broker for them. What do you think the sports betting companies do? Does FanDuel launch its own platform using the Betfair exchange technology? Does DraftKings try and buy someone like Smarkets or Matchbook or a US exchange? How do these big sports betting companies deal with this potential threat?
Well, I think they all should be. FanDuel, especially because they have the Betfair connection, I think should be doing this. I don't know if they are. But the way I see this shaking out in 20 years is all these big brands are going to be brokers that sit on top of an exchange. Like, I don't think any sports book will be making any of their own markets in 20 years. It's similar to stocks. Like, Fidelity doesn't trade stocks, really. They hold your account, they forward the money, they clip the trade, they make commissions when you do this, that, and the other. And I think sports betting eventually will look like the financial markets. And the easy answer for all these sports books, what they should be doing, they should be getting brokerage licenses and plugging into the exchange and getting rid of their trading departments. I think that's eventually where this ends up. Now, I think there's a window to, obviously Kalshi had a 2-year head start. but I don't think it's a given that they're going to be the dominant exchange in a couple of years. So there's a play for these other companies to try to become the dominant exchange. And I think there's a lot of value in being the dominant exchange. So if I were FanDuel DraftKings, I would look to be trying to become the dominant exchange because of all the economic benefits and that might accrue to that person, to that entity. But short of that, everybody should have a broker license.
Yeah, that was going to be the question. Who's the exchange you were talking about there? Because at the minute you would say it is Kalshi, but yeah, FanDuel looks like it will have a decent crack at that if they deploy the Betfair exchange. And then if you're DraftKings, do you have to go and buy someone? It's probably quite hard to build in a year.
They could buy.
You build it in a year or 2 years?
It took me 15 years to build an exchange. So, I mean, with AI, you probably could speed that up a little bit. I don't know how much you could speed it up. I think the big thing that it's easy to underestimate is the sort of, what's the right way to put it? You have to build the muscle to run an exchange. It's a different type of company than these, being a high margin, low volume bookmaker is an incredibly different world from a high volume, low margin exchange. And I think the biggest hurdle these companies, like even though that they probably have infinite money compared to somebody like us, culturally, they're not exchanges. They're not in this world of low margin, thinking about high frequency. They ban winners. Like, if a winner sneezes, you get banned, that kind of thing. So the biggest hurdle is probably cultural, and it's not money nor technological. And I think these companies are going to struggle to make that transition.
I think they might take some issue with being called low volume.
They're low volume compared to what they could be, and they're also low volume compared to global sports betting.
Right, a couple more questions for you, Jason, and I'll get you out of there. How's UK betting going? The exchange market specifically?
Exchange market's kind of dead. I mean, the exchange went through this Kalshi buzz, I want to say like the early 2000s, late 2000s. I don't know, how do you say that? Like the period between 2000 and 2010. Like 2008, 9, 10 was peak prediction market in the UK. It was like noun verb. In the UK, they called it a betting exchange, which is the same thing for all you Americans. That was like buzzy. And Betfair made tons of money. And then they got the gateway drug of adding poker. And then they became a casino site. And then they merged with Paddy Power. And then they became a boring gambling company that granted makes a lot of money, but they kind of lost their way in terms of like pushing the technical envelope. So we came along. There's always been BetDAC on the side. Matchbook is trying. So there's been a few competitors that have tried. But the exchange market has really not gone past that 10-15% market share peak that it achieved in probably 2010. My hypothesis is the exchange interface is too complicated, and we have very similar interface from Betfair. But it's been a staid market and not that exciting and interesting. Like the product that's growing for us is our sportsbook product that's built on top of our exchange, but it looks like a sportsbook. My hypothesis is that if you take some of these notes, what I do really like about Kalshi and Polymarket as well is they have great interfaces, I think, much better than the sort of Betfair style interface. And so my hypothesis is that if you make the interface easier to understand, you can start to break open the market. And that's what we're going to try to do that. And hopefully that's successful in trying to show the attractiveness of people being able to trade these markets. The other thing that I think the UK exchange market has gotten crunched by, and you might have a personal experience since you're a big exchange user, but like 15 years ago, there wasn't that much to speculate on in the UK. And now you can speculate on stocks a lot easier. Crypto's obviously blown up. So if you want to have that itch of like, I want to take a flutter on something, there's a lot more options than there were 15 years ago. And I think that's part of the reason that the exchange market in the UK has lost its luster a little bit, because there's, crypto is kind of the place that people think about speculation. But 15 years ago, it was sports betting. There wasn't crypto. Stocks was a pain in the ass to trade 15 years ago in the UK. So the exchange markets had competition from that side as well.
Yeah, I think if you want to find somewhere to like trade and try and make 10x in a day, I think you go to a crypto exchange now and you trade meme coins or whatever. Like I've got a friend who quit his job recently to go and do that, and he's trying to 10x his money every day, and that's just quite a lot more fun than a Premier League match or a tennis match. Like
well, 15 years ago was a Premier League match. People were quitting their job to trade sports 15 years ago. Yeah. Right now they're not. They're quitting their job to trade crypto, and then in 15 years it'll be something else that people are speculating on, like the price of copper or something like that. So that the volatility zeitgeist will move to a different asset class at some point. But It used to be sports in the UK. It's no longer sports.
All right, Jason, that is all we have time for. Thanks again for giving me your time today, and good luck with your expansion into prediction markets in the US.
Thanks, Brad.
Thanks. And to our listeners, please drop us a review on Spotify. Drop me a line on LinkedIn if you want to hear more about the work we do at Eilers Krejcik. And thank you all for listening.
The Business of Betting podcast is presented by Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. 4 out of the top 5 U.S. operators personalize player experiences with Optimove, the #1 CRM marketing solution for the iGaming industry. Learn more about Optimove by requesting a demo at optimove.com/businessofbetting. And if you like what you see, you will get your first month free.